With the 36th chapter of the book of Yeshayah, we go back to chapters that we saw earlier in the book of Melachim, chapters that describe the time period that we've spoken about so much when the Assyrian king laid siege, Sargon, Sancheireb, around Yerushalayim. Chapter 36, Parak Lamed Vav, Vayi Barbas, Reishan Elimelech, Hizkiyahu, Allah, Sancheireb, Melech Ashur, Al Kol Arei Yudah, Sarot, Vayit Pesem. The 14th year of King Hizkiyahu, Sancheireb, the Assyrian, marched and defeated, took all of the towns of Yehuda. Vayishlach Melech Ashur Rav Shakeh, Milachish, Yerushalma, Elimelech Hizkiyahu, Bechel Kaved, Vayamod Betalat HaBrecha Yonah, Silat Stei Choves. And from Lachish, the Assyrian king sent Rav Shakeh with a large force to take a position near Jerusalem by the upper pool. And Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and Shevna, the scribe, and Yoach, the recorder, went out to greet him. And we read an earlier chapter where Yeshayah describes that this middle person, Shevna, who was the Sofer, was actually a turncoat, probably, and was told that he would be greatly punished for his behavior. We don't see it in these chapters, but that's what we're told by Yeshayah in other places. Vayomer Alehem Rav Shakeh, we're in verse 4, Pasuk Dalet. Imru na'al Chizkiyahu ko amar lecha gadol melech Ashur ma bitachon hazeh asher batachta. And Rav Shakeh said, tell Hizkiyahu that the great king, right, an assault to God, saying that Sancheireb is a great king. We know in Jewish life there's only one great king, which is God. The great king, the king of Assyria, says, what are you so confident in? Who are you listening to that's giving you this advice that you're rebelling against me? Who are you relying on? Are you relying upon Egypt? It's not a tree, it's just a reed. It's going to be punctured, it's going to fall. That's what happened to anybody who relies upon Paro. It's going to fall. And in this way, the Assyrian king, Sancheireb and Rav Shakeh, are in agreement with Yeshayah, who has told the Jewish people so many times in this book, don't rely upon the Egyptians. There's only one thing you rely upon. And here we see in one of the interesting things, we saw this and talked about this in the book of Malachim. How could you rely upon your God when Hizkiyahu removed all of his high places? He removed all his shrines and altars and said to the Jewish people, you must come here to worship only in this Mizbeach. Of course, we see that as the Jewish people as a great mitzvah. God wants the Jewish people to come together, wants us to be one together, wants us to come be olel regel and worship God in Jerusalem. But to the others, they see it as Hizkiyahu is taking away from God's glory and seems to be saying that he is only doing this for himself. But that's not the way we see it. So now make I'll give you 2,000 horses if you want to, mix with the king of Assyria. How could you refuse anything, even from one of the deputies? A pachad probably means kind of like a pasha. We'll see that word again in the books of Haggai and Malachi. How could you refuse? I'm not the king. I'm just a deputy. I'm just a pasha. But how could you ignore the offer of one of the king's lesser servants? And you're going to rely upon Egypt for chariots and riders? And do you think I've marched against this land to destroy it without God? It was God who told me to go up and destroy the land, did destroy it. And interestingly, right, this is something that we've seen so many times, that Yeshayah, speaking from God, has described Assyria as his handiwork. The Assyrians have come in and destroyed the northern kingdom, and that was God destroying them for their rebelling against God, for their not worshiping God, for their idolatry, for their taking advantage of the poor, of the weak. And so here, in a sense, I don't know if the Assyrian kings knew the words of Yeshayah, but that's the way he saw himself. He saw himself as a messenger of God. And speak to us in Aramean. We understand Aramean. Speak to us in your language. We don't want you to speak in our language, in Judean, in Yehudit, in Ivrit, because then everybody's going to hear it and they're going to be worried. They're going to be scared. So atam v'lishtot meimei ragleihem imachem. Rav Shaka said, of course we're speaking to them we're speaking to you in the language they can understand. We're not here just to speak to your master. We're speaking to the people who are on the wall, the people who are eating their own dung and drinking their urine, right? The people who are suffering. We're telling them to not rebel against us. We're telling them to rebel against you, the leaders, the king, so that you won't suffer greatly. Give in so you won't be destroyed by the Assyrian king. And then Rav Shakeh raises his voice so everybody will hear him in Hebrew. Everybody will understand it. And he says again, this is the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Don't rely upon Hizkiyahu. He's deceiving you. He will not be able to save you. And don't rely upon what Hizkiyahu is saying, that God will save us, that the city will not fall into the hands of Assyria. Don't listen to him. And what does the king Hizkiyahu say? Make peace with me and come out, and you can eat from your vines and your fig trees and drink water from your cisterns. And this is a great verse because this is messianic language. Who knows if this is really what Rav Shaka says, or this is what the author is putting the words into Rav Shaka's mouth. This ishka tachat gafno, ish tachate, no, not the word tachat there, but right, the person are sitting under their fig tree, sitting under their vine. If you join me, you'll be joining the great king. Then things will be messianic. Then you will be protected. It's right, the letter in Washington that Washington wrote to the Turo synagogue, right? There's the same language. Ad bo'i v'lakachti etchem la'eretz kartzechem eretz dagan v'tirosh eretz lechem ukramim. And then I will take you to a land like your own land, of bread and wine and grains and fields and vineyards. This land is nothing. I'm going to take you to a better place. Pen yasit etchem Hizkiyahu le'mor Adonai atzilenu atzilu Elohei agoyim ish et artzo miyad melech Ashur. And don't listen to Hizkiyahu who's misleading you, saying God will save us. Did any of the other nations God save them from the king of Assyria? We're the gods of Hamat, Arpad, we're the gods of Sepharavim, and did they serve Shomron for me? Those gods didn't defeat me, neither will your God. Those gods couldn't save their countries, and your God won't be able to save Jerusalem from my hand. But the people were silent. They didn't say anything. Because the command of the king was, don't answer them. Don't lay credence to their claims. Don't argue with them. Don't play ping pong. Don't play it back and forth. We are going to rely upon God. And so the three of them, Eliakim and Shovna and Yoach, they came back with their clothes torn, and they reported to King Hizkiyahu what Rav Shaka said, his blasphemy, his statements that the God of Israel would not save the Jewish people. What will be Hizkiyahu's response? We'll have to find out in the next chapter. But if you've been studying with us, of course, you heard about it a good month or 2 months ago.